The movie begins in the year 1919. World War I has ended, and all countries are now at peace. The movie introduces an Australian farmer named Joshua. He lives in a dry area where water is very scarce. However, he is an expert at finding underground water. Joshua returns home, where his wife is waiting. She tells him that their 3 sons are inside and want to hear a story from him, but when Joshua goes inside, he finds no one there. In reality, he lost all 3 of his sons in World War I. They had joined the war to fight for their country. His wife, however, refuses to accept that their sons are dead because their bodies were never found. Joshua, on the other hand, has accepted their deaths. His sons went to war 4 years ago, and now that the war is over, if they were alive, they would have returned home by now. Joshua's wife keeps telling him, "You are an expert at finding water in the desert, but you couldn't find our sons?" Joshua has no answer to her question. He is deeply sad but does not share his pain with anyone. He falls asleep, lost in memories of his sons. The next morning when he wakes up, his wife is not at home. He goes out to look for her and finds her dead body in a nearby pond. This breaks him even more. After burying his wife, he promises her that he will find their sons' remains and bury them next to her grave. With this mission, he sets out on a journey. On his way, he remembers an incident when he was caught in a storm with his 3 sons. He had covered them with a blanket and encouraged them to stay strong. He always thinks about his sons. After traveling for 3 months, he reaches Istanbul. There, a boy approaches him and says, "Come to our hotel. We have good food and a place to stay." But Joshua is in a hurry to reach Gallipoli, the place where his sons fought in the war. He goes to a police officer and says, "I want to go to Gallipoli." The officer replies, "No ordinary person is allowed to go there. If you want to go, you need permission from the British authorities." Before Joshua can decide what to do next, the same boy who invited him to the hotel, his name is Ron, suddenly grabs Joshua's bag and runs away. Joshua chases after him. Ron keeps running but finally stops near his hotel. Then he returns Joshua's bag to him and asks Joshua, "I want you to stay at our hotel." Joshua agrees. At the hotel, Joshua meets Ron's mother, who is a widow. Her husband, Ron's father, died in the war. Joshua tells her, "I am from Australia, and I heard that there is a room available here." When Ron's mother hears the name Australia, she immediately says, "There is no room available." This is because she lost her husband in a war against Australia. Just then, another man comes and gives Joshua the room key. Joshua goes to his room. Later, Ron's mother brings him a towel and says, "There are many beautiful places to see in this city. You should visit them." Joshua replies, "I did not come here for sightseeing. I have an important mission. I need to go to Gallipoli as soon as possible." Hearing the name Gallipoli, Ra'an's mother looks shocked. She says, "There is nothing there except ghosts. That place has turned into ashes." Joshua does not respond. The next morning, Joshua goes to the British headquarters. He shows the British officer photos of his 3 sons and says, "I want to go to Gallipoli. I need to find my sons' remains and take them back to my country so I can bury them next to my wife's grave. Please give me permission to go there." The British officer refuses. He says, "There are thousands of dead bodies buried there. That place is now their final resting place. We cannot allow you to go." During World War I, different countries fought in 2 separate groups. Australia was part of the British group, so Joshua needs permission from the British to visit Gallipoli. Since he does not get permission, Joshua returns to the hotel, feeling disappointed. Meanwhile, there are protests in the city against the British. Many people are marching and shouting slogans because everyone lost someone in World War I. There is a lot of hatred towards the British. At the hotel, Ron's grandfather asks Joshua about his wife. Joshua replies, "My wife is no longer in this world." Ron's mother is also there. She asks him, "And your children?" Joshua does not answer. Ron's mother understands that something terrible happened to him. She tells him, "If you really want to go to Gallipoli, you should find a fisherman. He might take you there for some money." Joshua thanks her and leaves the hotel with his belongings. As Joshua is leaving, Ra'an runs after him. He gives Joshua a photograph and says, "This is my father's photo. A few years ago, he went to fight in the Gallipoli War, but he never returned home. If you find him, please bring him back." Joshua now understands that Ron's father also died in the war, and his mother is a widow. This might be why she hates Australians and the British. Joshua continues his journey and takes a boat to Gallipoli. While traveling across the sea, a soldier notices him. The colonel orders his soldiers to bring Joshua to him. Joshua is taken to the colonel, who explains, "We have a special team searching for the bodies of Australian and New Zealand soldiers. These 2 countries fought together against the Middle Eastern soldiers here." The colonel adds, "If we find any trace of your sons or their bodies, we will put their names on a memorial plate." Joshua replies, "I know where my sons were during their final moments." He takes out a map to show the colonel the exact location. As he opens the map, his son's photograph falls to the ground. The colonel looks at the picture and recognizes Joshua's 3 sons. The colonel tells him, "You should go back. If we find anything, we will inform you." But Joshua refuses to leave. He stays on the beach, waiting. Seeing this, the colonel tells his soldiers, "Give him a blanket and some food." A Turkish major is also present. He is there to help the colonel because he knows this entire battlefield well. Even though the Turks and Australians fought against each other during the war, the major now wants to help Joshua. He says to the colonel, "Joshua is the only father who has come here looking for his children. I know the location where they fought. It will be very difficult to find them, but we should at least try." The colonel agrees, and Joshua is called back. Joshua is taken to the place where his sons fought. A flashback shows how his 3 sons were fighting in battle. Suddenly, Arthur steps on a landmine. There is a huge explosion, and he is badly injured. His 2 brothers try to cover him, providing fire support, but the enemy shoots them both, and they die on the battlefield. The soldiers find the remains of Joshua's 2 sons. Joshua wants to see them, but the colonel does not allow him. However, Arthur's remains are still missing. Joshua decides to take his 2 sons' remains back to Australia, but the colonel stops him and says, "Don't do that. This is their home now. Let them rest here." Joshua agrees and buries his sons with full rituals at Gallipoli. That night, Joshua has a dream. He sees Arthur is still alive and was not killed in the war. The next morning, the Turkish major arrives with new information. The major notices Joshua's last name and shows him a list of prisoners. He says, "Some people are still held as prisoners, and your son Arthur might be one of them. He could still be alive with the war prisoners." Hearing this, Joshua feels overjoyed. He quickly returns to Ron's hotel and then goes to the British headquarters. He tells the British officer, "I think my son is still alive with the war prisoners. I need your help." But the British officer refuses to help. He says, "I told you that you are not allowed to go to Gallipoli, but you still went there." Then he takes away Joshua's passport and says, "I will come to you on Thursday and you will be sent back to Australia." Joshua returns to the hotel. This time, Ron's mother no longer hates him. She now understands his pain because he lost his sons in the war. She tells Joshua, "My husband also went to war and died, but I still believe he is alive, because if I accept that he is dead, then his brother, who lives with us, will force me to marry him. He wants me to say yes at any cost, but I don't want to marry him." Joshua now understands her situation. The next day, Ron's uncle tries to hit Ron's mother because she refuses to marry him. Just then, Joshua arrives, grabs the man, and throws him to the ground. The man gets angry and says, "I will take revenge on you." However, Ra'an's mother gets upset with Joshua. She says, "You have made things even worse. Now leave our hotel." Joshua leaves the hotel, but as soon as he steps outside, Ra'an's uncle returns with his men. They attack Joshua and beat him badly. At the same moment, a sergeant arrives and stops the fight. He says, "The major wants to see you." Joshua is taken to the major. The major tells Joshua that the Greeks have attacked their country and have taken control of many areas. He says, "The British are not helping us, so we must fight on our own. Tomorrow morning, we will leave for battle. I strongly believe that we might find your son there. You can come with us." Joshua agrees to go with them, but for now, he returns to the hotel. At the hotel, Ron's mother apologizes to Joshua. She says, "Your bag was left here. My son Ron has kept it in your room." By now, Joshua and Ron have become very close. They have spent a lot of time together. The next morning, a British officer arrives to take Joshua back to Australia. But before the officer can reach him, Ra'an's mother helps Joshua escape. Joshua quickly runs to the major, and together they leave the town by train. While traveling, the major shows Joshua an old bat and says, "I found this on the battlefield. I think it's a weapon." Joshua smiles and says, "This is not a weapon. It's a cricket bat. People play a game with it." He explains the rules of cricket to the major. As they continue, they see a village burning in the distance. They realize that the Greeks have attacked the village. Suddenly, Greek soldiers attack their train as well. Most of the people on the train are killed. Only 3 survive: the major, a sergeant, and Joshua. Since Joshua is Australian, the Greeks decide to deal with him later. First, they try to kill the major. Just as the Greek officer is about to shoot the major, Joshua attacks him with the cricket bat, saving the major's life. Both of them escape, but the sergeant is killed. Joshua and the major reach a small town. Joshua sees a windmill and realizes that he had seen this windmill in his dreams many times. He takes it as a sign that his son Arthur might be there. there. Joshua asks the locals about his son. The people tell him that the man who built the windmill is inside the church. Joshua runs to the church. Inside, he finally finds his son, Arthur. Arthur sees his father and is overjoyed but also deeply sad. Arthur reveals his painful truth. He says, "One of my brothers survived the war, but he was badly wounded. He was in terrible pain and wanted to be free from suffering. He begged me to help him end his life. After many requests, I finally did what he asked, but I have felt guilty ever since. That's why I never came back home." Joshua listens and replies, "Without you, I have no one left in this world. Your mother is also gone. You must come back to Australia with me." Arthur agrees to return home. Just then, Greek soldiers attack. They are the same soldiers who attacked the train earlier. The major arrives and tells them, "We need to escape now." Joshua and Arthur manage to escape safely from the Greek soldiers. Joshua and Arthur return to Ra'an's hotel. Ra'an's mother is overjoyed to see Joshua reunited with his son. In the final scene, Ra'an's mother makes coffee for Joshua. As Joshua drinks the coffee with a smile, it becomes clear that he and Ra'an's mother have developed feelings for each other. With this, Joshua's journey comes to an end. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel and don't forget to give the video a like.